brainstorming this project, and in the Pacific with such gravity and such a new
Usaha mai ina panua baka na batulebu na ndrau mangwele na momo na tuinandi. Usaha mai korabia ka kile na taka na bungu ni bisureti metia sabu ya tika na kai bola. Sabu rawa na kai ronga na singa binani kwa memengo rabi kai na taka. Sabu ndo pala mai kina wanga na taki ya usaha pura mai kina panua baka na batulebu. Rasaan gili na tiri karuan na inono ni abu sa ina pasifika mere mai baka dudu taki niya. Na puli ni bingo rabi mengo rabi usaha sobu mai usaha mbutu kana kai mangwele. Kana Tanoa na yango na sakele baki sana ni kwa sa tisi.
It is a great pleasure and honor to be here to speak to you. I do bring my warm greetings, especially from the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Sitiveni Rambuka, who is also the Minister for Climate Change in our government. I think I saw my friend Ulumila Reg somewhere. Thank you for being here. Of course, you are no stranger, and I'm very pleased that you are working with on your PhD right now. But let me once again thank my good friend, Professor Stephen Rutuba, for extending this honor in which to make some introductory remarks. And I believe at such a groundbreaking regional conference on climate change assessments by the convening of two fine Pacific institutions of higher education, the University of Canterbury in New Zealand and the University of the South Pacific. The coalition government is always welcoming of climate change initiatives, and I wholeheartedly thank the government of New Zealand as represented by Rebecca from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade for supporting this project and for investing in local talent and expertise. As you know, the issue of climate change and environmental protection falls under the portfolio of the Honorable Prime Minister, as I said earlier, and you will be aware of his intention to prioritize by his active participation and more recently at the 2023 Oceans Conference in Panama. Climate change can no longer be considered a distant threat. It is happening right now in our Pacific neighborhood, and I know I don't need to say this to many of you from our Pacific community and Pacific family whose lived experiences are more confronting on a daily basis than it is for us here in Fiji. Something happened to our national psyche during and immediately after the devastation of Cyclone T.C. Winston in 2016. And in fact, if you look back, it's already been 7 years, but the remnants of her fury remains with us today, both economically and emotionally. Where disaster preparedness used to be a matter of complacency in the past, T.C. Winston jolted us in all directions and reminded us of the kind of devastation that could be caused by such disasters. In the Pacific, as you all know, we have witnessed varying degrees of the destructive power of natural disasters, eroding coastlines, loss of precious marine life, such as coral bleaching. But it is our people, most of all, especially from our rural communities, who bear the heaviest burden of rebuilding when they lose everything. It is only after coming out of a harrowing experience such as a Category 5 cyclone after the rubble is cleared, when many dear friends of Fiji, such as Australia and New Zealand, arrived immediately after the cyclone to assist in our recovery. And they're still doing it in many ways. And that shows that we can draw on the resilience of our people against climate change. Resilience gives us more latitude in which to bounce back from climate-related disasters, especially those hardest hit in our communities, so that food, shelter, water, clothing, electricity, health care, sanitation, and safety allows them to get back on their feet. Of course, after the T.C. Winston, the national discourse in Fiji also focused on hardening infrastructure and homes that can withstand the impacts of extreme weather events. By constructing stronger buildings, improving reticulation, implementing early warning systems, we can minimize the loss of life and property. This, of course, has economic considerations as well as a need for new building standards by engineers, architects, and building contractors. However, resilience and vulnerability alone are not enough. These are pillars need to be backed up by adaptation, our ability to adjust to changing climatic conditions. And in the Pacific, we are only too aware from our engagement at the global climate change negotiations how we continue to insist that we are the least responsible for global emissions compared to industrialized nations, yet we pay the highest price with our small economies when climate-induced disasters strike. Thankfully, as stated earlier, we are rich in our traditional science, customary knowledge, and practices that have sustained us for generations. And now, in some ways, they may hold the key to our future. It is essential that we be led by traditional wisdom where it's necessary, and weave it where possible with modern scientific advancements, research, and development for innovative solutions to help us adapt to the climate change challenges ahead. But let us not be any further complacent about these things. Fiji, through the Climate Change Act and the National Oceans Policy, has also placed significant emphasis on research and knowledge. In fact, Part 8 of the Climate Change Act is completely devoted to research, data collection, reporting, and monitoring. This underscores a commitment to invest in climate change research and to broaden our understanding of the implications of this phenomenon on Fiji and the Greater Pacific. The nation's ocean policy also has a dedicated goal on knowledge, stressing the importance of integrating traditional environmental knowledge with the best available science. The innate knowledge of the symbiosis of the ocean and our people of the Pacific, since time immemorial, is owned by our people, and science in some ways is now only catching up. It is therefore critical that we invest our energy in the protection and storing of this knowledge. Therefore, research for climate change assessments that draws upon traditional science must honor the holders of traditional knowledge. And I know my friend Professor Rutuba knows when we write academic papers, we acknowledge published authors and scientists. We often draw on a lot of knowledge and experience from our traditional store or stock of knowledge, but we often acknowledge them as the custodians of those knowledge. So I feel it is important that as researchers, we ought to begin to do that and perhaps, weave that in our own research and writing a little bit more. To this end, I think as a coalition government, we also need to look at our National Research Council Act of 2017 and maybe look at our policies on immigration for research and see how we can align that to accepting and integrating traditional knowledge that exists quite widely and extensively in the Pacific. You can draw on the experiences of most communities, whether they are our Rotuman community here in Fiji, our Itoke community, whether it's a Solomon Islander community, Ni Vanuatuan, Tongan, Samoan, Chinese, Tuvaluan, Rambi, Vanuban Islanders. We can draw on the experiences of many of these communities. I recall some years back, the South Pacific Regional Environmental Program in Samoa began an innovative weather warning project that weaved in traditional knowledge among meteorologists. And I hope those examples can be used in the future. These insights that I share today pose another thought for reflection. And that is, our policymakers must no longer be content to sit in the offices of our various capitals, spending around at regional and international meetings without regular on-the-ground truthing and understanding the situation. And I feel that if we're really representing our people at global climate change negotiations, their stories, their interests, their voices must echo through us. And that is why a meeting like this is very important and critical in reminding ourselves of our place in the bigger picture. Climate change negotiations, after all, despite the technical and acronym-laden jargon, is about people and our people. So, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot address our climate issues without our status as large ocean states being at the heart of it. The ocean plays a crucial role in regulating our climate. They act as nature's carbon sink, absorbing vast amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, the relentless burning of fossil fuels has led to a dramatic increase in greenhouse gases emissions, causing the oceans to absorb excessive amounts of CO2. What has been lacking thus far was a documented understanding of the intricacies of our intergenerational relationship and knowledge of our ocean. The extent that the negative impacts of the climate crisis has had on our marine ecosystems needs research, and through initiatives such as the Pacific Ocean Climate Crisis Assessment Project, we hope to demystify a lot of this, especially circumstances that need to be addressed immediately. Furthermore, if the discourse on the oceans and climate nexus is being looked at, Fiji's Climate Change Act also needs refining. For example, the previous government passed that law and inserted a clause for a carbon budget. The previous government, of course, was not able to do that, and I can tell you in all honesty that the coalition government may consider it in next year's budget. Fiji's Climate Change Act must also be refined to not only cite blue carbon as extensively as it does, but ensure that it provides a sound and reasonable mechanism to register blue carbon sequestration property rights that does not solely involve the Registrar of Titles. Therefore, while mangroves, seagrass, and saltwater marshes are valuable blue carbon stores that for the most part can be found with customary fishing grounds, we need to fix this gap in the treatment of registration of blue carbon sequestration property rights in the law. And I want to commend the work of the University of Canterbury and the University of the South Pacific that you have jointly embarked on delivering on this project, which actually spans almost the entirety of the region. It goes without saying that to realize our climate ambition goals, we need to address the crisis as the Blue Pacific and not independently. Initiatives such as these are drivers for regionalism and is a testament to our shared intention of protecting that which we are custodians of, such as our ocean. And I believe that the work of this climate assessment complements the work that we have been striving to complete under the research and systems observation agenda, and hopefully this will greatly assist the positions of Pacific small island states during the negotiations under the Ocean Climate Nexus mandate of the UNFCCC. Policymakers in Fiji and the region look forward to the climate assessments that you are working on. These are important inputs from our domestic policy making. These will be significant inputs for our regional policy making. There will be powerful inputs in the international diplomacy on climate and oceans headed by our Honorable Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka for Fiji and by the Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum for the region as a whole. And I can tell you, as Fiji's Finance Minister, I need to know what a 3-degree Celsius temperature rise means for our farmers, for our roads, for our critical infrastructure, for our airports. I need to understand the scale of financing needed to adapt and build the resilience, notwithstanding all the debate that we are having about adaptation funding, the right balance between adaptation and mitigation funding, and the commitment of the developed world in meeting and making sure that those commitments are made and available. Fiji's health minister, for example, needs to know what health consequences we must plan for at 2 or 3 degrees Celsius temperature rise. These climate assessments matter for saving lives. Fiji's minister responsible for poverty alleviation, for example, needs to understand how many more households will end up with elevated levels of food security as our reef systems collapse under the weight of 1.5 Celsius temperature increase. So these climate assessments matter for our poverty reduction efforts. We need to prepare for these scenarios. We need to plan and program. As a country, we must never be in a situation where government begins to distribute water tanks after a drought has already started, or government begins to relocate people only after saltwater intrusion has already destroyed crops and livelihood. These are things that we must do and prepare for, because that is what all the data suggests the world is headed towards. The world is likely to reach a 1.5 Celsius rise within the next 5 years. This is alarming. This is outrageously irresponsible. This is outright selfish of the large polluters, both in our immediate neighborhood and well beyond. Our Honorable Prime Minister is crystal clear in his view. Fiji and the Pacific must not have to adapt and build their resilience through loans. The industrial world has led us to this. They must pay up for this destruction. That is why the world must deliver by 2025 at least $750 billion annually in climate finance. That is why the world must deliver on at least 50 billion annually by 2025 for small island developing states, earmarked for them on grant terms and at the most or highly concessionary terms and nothing less. We look to the new head of the World Bank to deliver on this promise. We look to the Green Finance Facility, GCF, to deliver on resources on this scale to small island states. We look to bilateral partners to deliver finances on this scale. And yes, we look to the large polluters, both developing and developed, to do a lot more. Your climate assessments are crucial building blocks for Fiji and the Pacific's international diplomacy. Fiji calls on the industrial world to make substantial contributions of new climate finance to the new loss and damage facility by the time the world meets for climate talks in UAE COP28 later this year. The time for talk is long, long gone. We are relocating some 40 villages for whom adaptation options are no longer available. We need to rebuild roads, infrastructure damaged or destroyed through repeated climate catastrophes. These stories are much worse in our low-lying atoll states across the Blue Pacific. Climate change is the story of our times. Working in solidarity and unity with fellow Pacific Island states, our civil society and our communities, this will be the story of our resilience and of our fortitude. We will not stop until we return to the planet to a path of 1.5 Celsius temperature rise. We will not stop until every person, every community, and every island state can feel safe and secure once again. This is our commitment in the coalition government. This is my commitment, and I'm sure that is the commitment of many of our Pacific Island leaders and people. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm happy to declare this very, very important conference open. Thank you. Vinaka Vakaleli.